Education. Call it to order at 7:06 p.m. with a reminder to all those watching and participating remotely to kindly mute your microphone to avoid any background noise. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting consistent with Connecticut Public Act 22-3. The public may attend in person or electronically via WebEx. This meeting is being recorded and the recording will be available on the district website.
It's not much.
I'm going to call the roll of the Board of Education members. Vice Chair, Dr. Maria Madonna.
Here.
Secretary, Ms. Sarah Beth Del Prete. I don't believe she's with us this evening. Dr. Jay Daya.
Here.
Ms. Brooke Hopkins, I don't see her remotely. Mr. Jeff Hughes.
Here.
Mr. Hughes will attend remotely this evening. Mr. Stephen Lawrence.
Present.
Dr. Michael Strambler.
Here.
Ms. Erin Williamson.
Here.
And I'm Lynn Piazza. Staff in attendance this evening include Ms. Vonda Tenza, Superintendent, Ms. Donna Coonan, Director of Business and Operations, Ms. Carrie Borcherding, Director of Special Services, Ms. Annalisa Sherman, Principal, Mr. James Sapia, Assistant Principal, Ms. Cheryl Toffel, Assistant Principal, and Ms. Marcia DeGennaro, Clerk of the Board, attending remotely. Thank you. We're moving on to item 3 on the agenda. The only item on this evening's agenda is the 2024-2025 Superintendent proposed budget. And so I'm going to turn the meeting over to Ms. Tenza and Ms. Coonan.
Thank you. I'm going to start by thanking the administrative team. The entire team is here this evening to support this initial presentation of the budget, and it was compiled through the efforts of the entire buildings departments and fed information from the staff. So this presentation is actually the superintendent's proposed budget, and what that means is that Donna and Lisa and I have met and talked and reviewed with all of the departments and tried to incorporate as many pieces as we could that we felt supported the district goals and the movement of the strategic plan. So what we have for you tonight is an overview. This is a special meeting. We added this meeting in advance of the regular board meeting next week so that you could have, as a board, the opportunity to listen tonight to what we have as a proposal and think if we have questions that we can, pretty quickly take care of. We would love to do that tonight, but otherwise, we encourage you to consider, reflect, send your questions to us. Anything that we have pretty much by Thursday afternoon, we can try to prepare for Monday. If you don't have time to write down your questions, you could call. And if you don't have time to do that, you can bring them next Monday and we will do our best then. And you'll see later on in the presentation. That we have additional meetings planned in January for additional discussion of the budget. So there will be no decision tonight. This is a special meeting to just listen to the overview. And next week, I am confident that there will be no decision next week either, that we are going to listen and reflect and ask questions. So we have 2 girls that are very creatively walking sideways on a sidewalk. But not, I know, that's here. Okay, but. we work very hard to incorporate the vision and mission of the Board of Education into all of our decisions. They fall through that filter. And you'll often hear administrators say, we want to do what's best for children. And you know that our teachers are always thinking about what is best for the learner in my classroom, the individual learner. So our mission focuses around creating and fostering a learning community that prepares children to be flexible, lifelong learners, and responsible global citizens. We spent a lot of time as a board unpacking those words and thinking about how they fit together to really represent the Beecher community. And our vision, right, that's supposed to be aspirational and big and powerful, and we believe it is. We believe that, we exist to empower and inspire future leaders who will positively impact our world. And we are confident that the education and the opportunities that we are providing our learners will do just that. Another piece of our thinking that shapes our decisions is the strategic plan for Woodbridge. And I'm not going to read all of the little pieces. We're pretty familiar with this. We have an academic framework goal where we are working on fostering inquiry skills and building confidence to progress through a standards-based curriculum. We are working to continue to create and support a very inclusive environment that promotes the social and well-being of all students. And we are also focusing on professional learning and integrating project-based learning as a strategy to promote choice and critical thinking, which is also something that will push our vision and mission forward. And those are lenses that filter through for our budget decisions. Why do we have a strategic plan? That strategic plan is actually very important. It engages everybody in directing the vision, so everybody has a piece of that. It focuses our vision to remind us of our clarity of purpose. It informs the use and allocation of our resources, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And it keeps education and learning at the center of everything that we do. We have a lot of achievements. There's more room on this slide. There wasn't when I was typing, so I can add to it. The administrative team kept peppering me with more and more and more reasons to celebrate Beecher Road School, and I have them all, but I just want to remind anybody who's listening as well as the board that we do some very wonderful, unique things here at Beecher Road School. We have an annual arts week. Last year's theme was peace. It is amazing the entire week. We are #1 in our DIRG B for smarter balance scores and math and ELA. That is no small feat, with over 80% exceeding or meeting benchmark in both math and reading language arts. You may be well aware that we were recently awarded the Apple Distinguished School Award, one of very few in the country. We have a Halloween hoop annual fundraiser that raises a tremendous amount of money. We have many staff right now involved in the masterclass Science of Reading. That was a pretty competitive cohort to learn more about improving reading literacy at the K-3 level. We also have even more staff involved in the Right to Read professional learning. We do some very unique bus driver appreciation celebrations. I think that's important to note because we're one of the few towns that I know that have a very special relationship with owner-operating bus company situation. It's fascinating and very successful. We have talented musicians for the CMEA, music, orchestra, band, choir, elementary honors festival. Those awards, I could just rattle them off, but they are a big deal. And our students place well above students in surrounding areas at a consistently competitive level. We're not just good at academics. We have a very amazing extended day and summer enrichment program offering that is unique and highly desired by other communities. We have an absolutely amazing MAG program for several of our grade levels. We have a very solid, high-functioning Board of Education. They just received a leadership award for their work. Everything here and more points to a very, very successful district. And our job is to honor the drivers that exist and try to keep that in a growing trajectory. Most budgets have very similar drivers. Most education budgets do use their strategic plan as a priority. We use enrollment. We look at enrollment. That drives our decisions, whether enrollment is declining, that drives decisions, or inclining, it drives decisions for staffing. We have contractual obligations that many people may not really think about when we think about salaries and transportation and how that factors into what our budget is comprised of for numbers. We have the same sustained services, utilities, insurance. We have a lot of costs that drive where our budget heads. None of these are new, and these are all actually pretty much the same drivers in everybody's educational budget in Connecticut and beyond. Our enrollment trends. So, it's kind of interesting. We have a few different ways to study our enrollment. It's not a magic wand. So the blue columns are previous actual enrollments, and the green are projected. And so, what I really want to say is we updated this in June, and then we updated it again in November. We used the Peter Crowder projections, and he's been doing this since, I believe, 1978, for many, many, many districts. So the bottom line is families with children are moving into Woodbridge. And he has data. It's a multi-page report that shows that Woodbridge is yet again unique, and we do not follow the state pattern. And that's a good thing. We, statewide over the last 10 years, the projected enrollment decreased 8% statewide. Ours increased 15%. That's amazing. It is anticipated in the next 10 years through the study of this report and all of the math that he did that I did make available to, but I can certainly make it available again. It's anticipated over the next 10 years that the state of Connecticut will grow pre-K 6 about 1% from where we are, progressively, and Woodbridge will grow another 17%. Families with children are moving to our district. The next chart is a chart that you're probably familiar with. I think we've seen this chart prior years. The green side, the left side, is our current enrollment as of October 1st, and it breaks it out by classroom and number of sections. The M stands for MAG, so that you can see in first, second, third, and fourth, one of their sections is a MAG section that caps about 20. So our enrollments are there. You can see that grade 6 is our largest class, and yellow is next year. So next year you can see that our large grade 6 of 7 sections is rolling off. And we talked about that last year. It was my first week here, right? Tomorrow marks my 1-year anniversary with you all. So last year at this time, I was sitting listening to intern Superintendent Syriac present the information, and I had studied it with her, but I was just a listener. And at that time, we talked about the ability for us to repurpose a position, not necessarily that person, but a position for a STEAM teacher. And nobody needed to lose their job, and it really wouldn't be of a cost. So that's very exciting for us to include that in this year's budget. So that would roll right over. Special education data, so we included this last year. We are including it again. It's kind of an interesting slide. It shows some trends and some data. This current year, you can see our numbers, and we are projecting out approximately how many referrals, evaluations, and PPTs we will have. So our referrals are up from last year. The evaluations, and again, in PPTs are projected, and they may be projecting down a little bit. Our director of pupil services has had opportunity this year to get into classrooms and to get into programming and study the way that decisions are made and IEPs are crafted to look for efficiencies. And we are starting in a few areas to see those efficiencies, even though it's only the beginning of December. And at some point, Carrie, has information, our Director of Pupil Services. It won't be tonight and it probably won't be December, but she's been putting together information to show you the scope of some of her work that she's been able to do with this year's ability for us to hire Cheryl Toffel, a second assistant principal. So we're pleased to see that that work is benefiting us and the children. Our multi-language learners. So our multi-language learners, the number continues to grow. And if you look at this, you can see that this year we have more students than we had last year. Just remember that at the end of 21-22, the multi-language learner position was reduced to half. And so last year, for the first part of the year, it was a half-time position. As the year progressed, the teacher came to us and said, I'm not able to meet these children's needs. And we repurposed some funds and pushed her to full-time for the remainder of the year. And she was happy to do it. We have a new multi-language learner teacher this year because ultimately the person that was in the position that really wasn't equipped or planning on full-time. And is missed, but we love our new multi-language teacher as well. The program continues to grow. So our numbers continue to grow and it's at a nice size, for a one FTE, one full-time equivalent position.
It's about 5.5% of our students are multi-language learners. Bigger than our DERG average of 4% and much bigger than the DERG A average of 1%.
And I do bigger than CDC. Yeah. Yep. So this is the slide where we would talk about some changes. So overall, this budget does not have really anything earth-shattering new. What it has is some efficiencies and repurposing. We're trying to carry on that tradition that was begun last year. So, it says here, we are looking to reduce one full-time elementary section due to an exiting sixth grade position. This does not increase the class sizes, and it does not reduce anybody's job. Nobody loses a job. We are looking to reallocate that position to restore the STEAM teacher, which existed, it looks like, we did a study for previously, it existed for many, many years, and was eliminated at the end of the 21-22 school year. So bringing that position actually is a science and math support. We have a lot of ideas as to how that can really help us, in addition to the fact that it will do some very common things like assure common experiences with makerspace, ensure some common experiences that are STEAM related, and assigned to 21st century skills. So we're very excited to be able to bring that position back at this point with the board's consideration without any monetary impact at all. Check the finger here. Okay, I probably clicked again. The second layer of this area review talks about some non-certified staff reallocations. So one of them has to do with simply reallocating with a little bit of an addition. So I believe in fiscal year 20, I'm gonna let Donna explain this, but really we're re-looking at how we have parceled out work that is assigned to the accounts payable accounts clerk position. The way it was parceled out a few years ago, or maybe even last year, is not working well. And again, we're looking at efficiency so that we can work at high levels. So we're looking to realign.
Yeah, it's hard to, we want to talk about positions and not people, but about 3 years ago, there was a 40-hour-a-week position in the business office that took care of not only accounts payable, but some minor reconciliations, accounting type work, the field trip account, the depositing the money for the field trips, some accounting for the extended day programs. And that position was cut to 20 hours, but the work was being done by a person who worked here for over 25 years and really good at their job. That person has since resigned, and we had taken those 20 hours and parsed it out to increasing someone's in the north office, giving them an extra 10 hours of work, and then leaving the part-time former staff person who can just do some work for us after the day. That's ours. So, and, you know, we're doing the best we can, but we're a little bit slow in paying our vendors. Things that need to get communicated during the business day is hard. Sometimes, you know, we can't make the connection during 8 to 5. So what we're proposing is maybe we could restore that a little bit, not all the way to 40 hours, but maybe to 30 hours. And have somebody, you know, we still like consulting with the former employee who now works at the town after hours, just because they have so much historical knowledge of the position. But we would like to have somebody in our office at least 20 hours a week to pay our bills more timely. And now that field trips and some of those things have returned to their pre-COVID levels, that's, you know, that's just a very busy part of the job. Most districts I've worked at with a school this size, there's usually a bookkeeper in addition to the person who pays the bills that takes care of that kind of work. So, you know, we kind of cram that into one position. And so that's our new thing.
So it really is a reallocation plus an addition. We're pulling 10 hours back from the North Office secretary who added those 10 hours on, so that person had a 6-hour day. So we're pulling those 2 hours back and the time back from the person who retired and is now at the time, as you know, kind of like at the end of the day after hours, and creating our own internal position and added a few hours. So that it does come up to 30 hours a week, right in our office reporting. Serving as a payroll backup. Right now, there's nobody trained in payroll backup, which
It's a big vulnerability for us.
Vulnerability. Yeah. So we're looking to increase that efficiency, and we see a way to do it that we feel like everybody is amenable to. You know, we've had some initial conversations, and it seems to be a good decision for everybody at this time. So that's our recommendation. And we would also like to see if we could keep the North Office attendance and dismissal coverage. So even though we're gonna take the 2 hours back from the person, we would like to keep that position back at 8 hours instead of 6, because that person really was giving our time in the middle of the day. And they were covering morning and that, like morning late students and calling, and they were calling end of the day pickups and covering that part. And in the middle of the day is when the person would zoom down to our office and do the business work. But we all know how hard it is to leave something once you're in there. It's hard to leave an office and get sucked in, and kids and staff need to.
And that person is also responsible for the door and the phone, which makes it very difficult to go in deep on a reconciliation or a call with a vendor or something, because they're constantly being interrupted. And it's an important part of our security that they're there to do that.
So our recommendation is to keep that position up in the North Office, 8 hours a day. It is a 10-month position, so it does not work in the summer. It never did. So it's student days only, but 8 hours instead of 6, and pull that extra time back down to the accounts payable positions. Other efficiency that we have found is that we are able to reduce 2 vacant paraeducator positions due to enrollment as students roll out next year that may have had a one-on-one para and or scheduling efficiency. So we actually, you know, we do have more than 2 vacant pairs right now. Not too many more than 2, but we do have a few more than 2. But These would not be people losing their jobs, and these are also students that are exiting that no longer need that para position. We can go back to all. Okay, this is tiny, and I'm gonna let Donna go through this, but this is actually simply the numerical chart that matches the verbal chart we talked about.
We can look at, last year and this year, and so this year, classroom teachers, we have 45 teachers, but we're proposing that we will roll off a sixth grade teacher, so there'll be 44 classroom teachers. But if you'll notice, under the STEAM teacher, we currently have 0 STEAM teachers, but we're proposing that we go to 1 STEAM teacher. So there's a net reduction and increase within that, but still remaining with 81 certified teachers. And then the other, under the instructional support, we call them paraeducators now, they're called teachers assistants on here. We will propose that we can go from 38.6 to 36.6 in the instructional support column, and the additional hours we are proposing in the clerical pool would take the clerical staff from a 6.1 FTE as a whole to a 6.3 FTE as a whole. That category is up rounded. So overall for the district, we would be reducing a 1.7 FTE. You can kind of, if you want to look back further at the history, you can see how some of these various positions have gone up and down. Oh, also we have wasn't budgeted this way last year, but we ended up bringing the school resource officer in-house. So that's a 1.0 that will continue to be a 1.0 next year.
This chart is common in just about every budget in Connecticut for a school, and the pie chart looks pretty much the same. Very little fluctuation, about 80%. This year it's a little bit higher than 80%. It's 81.6 are what we would call salaries and benefits, like a fixed cost. That's really something that the only way to chip away at that large number would be to reduce staff and benefits. The rest of those percentages range from, I believe, like a 4.2 to a less than 1. Those are the other pieces, whether it's transportation, supplies, furniture.
Some of the other things to be considered in putting this budget together, we don't have a true rate yet from our insurance provider, but upon talking with Blueprint Benefits and looking at, and they look at a rolling average of the last 12 months, together we came up with a kind of a starting point of 9% as a guess at what we might be looking at for insurance premium increases for next year. That's what we built in. We're in the 5th year of our transportation contract with the BOA group. We are not thinking that we'll have to go up a bus next year. We have the large class rolling off, and with the new rules about kindergarten, birthday, it's we're thinking that probably won't be a bigger than normal class, maybe even smaller than what we're used to because of the cuts. So we're thinking we won't have to increase our buses next year. But starting mid-year this year, we did have some additional special ed transportation for outplacements that, will be continuing next year. So together, yeah, all of that together, you know, is getting about an 8% increase in our next tuition. Something unique, and we talked about this last year, the tuition line. We had been showing the behavioral therapist contract in that line. Just kind of never made sense to myself or Vonda, so we are now putting it in the professional services contract line. So it might appear that our tuition line is going down when it really isn't. You know, the tuition is about the same, but about $135,000 from that line is now in another line. And you won't see a big jump in that line this year just because that is the line where we used to pay for the school resource officer. So, you know, you'll see a small decrease in that line, but not what we would have expected as an increase. And that is, when we get further to the book, that's like object 390, where you see those changes. I think we're not expecting any changes in our water rates. You know, if they end up having to getting the pool going and filling the pool, which at this point we don't know, but we don't have anything that leads us to believe that's going to be the case. Our electricity rates, we've had a great electricity rate. Actually, maybe we'll go to the chart. We'll go and I can still talk about the thing. If you'll notice, like in FY20, how the orange bar went down. We locked into a nice rate then, just under 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And we have maintained that until November of 24. So we'll have 1/3 of the year at the nice rate, but then we're going to have to adjust. We don't know what the rate's going to be, but for purposes of this, I kind of just assumed today's rate. But again, you know, if you look at last year, why were we so low last year? Well, you know, I think as the pool is not operating, we're not running those filters. I think that's saving us quite a bit on electricity. Home. Electricity a lot more in the summer when we're filtering our pool, but so I think we're having a little bit of benefit from that not being on as well. And natural gas. So we, it was January, we had to change our natural gas rate from last year. So we have a much higher gas rate, but we had a very warm winter last year, so we didn't have to pay the price too much for that. We have now been in that a year in January, and we're going to get to reduce our rate about 18% to a lower natural gas rate for next year. But then again, we're not heating the water in that pool because that pool is empty. So we're seeing, you know, a little bit of double benefit, better rate, less decatherms or whatever that we have to purchase. So we will continue to talk with Titan, who's kind of our energy consultant, but our most recent information from that leads me to believe we are going to have some savings in both savings from our budget, not the R23 actuals, but saving what we budgeted for this year. We won't have to budget as much for 25 and next year.
So, yes, it is. You know, our thoughts for technology next year. So this year we began our smart board replacement plan and targeted 3rd and 4th grade. So next year we are looking at the next outside layers of 2nd and 5th grade as well as MAG, so that, you know, those grade levels have these boards. They're actually quite successful and really liked by some teachers, and they're really developing their skills. And at some point I'd love to we'll get some examples for you to see as to how they're being used in a very collaborative and communicative fashion. It's very exciting. Also, the replacement of iPads with cases and keyboards that keeps our circulation fresh. At this point for this upcoming year, we're gonna remain with sixth grade Chromebooks only and evaluate that and see how that's going. Right now, when I see the kids and I ask, you know, their thumbs are up and they're very happy, but we wanna kind of see at the end of the year before we make a decision to go any further, if we would at all, with that, but we're very happy with that so far. We put in here for some document cameras as well as some additional MacBooks. So that's the technology inclusion for next. So what's not in here would be necessarily any additional STEAM related items because we want to, we talked about this. So we do have items from the previous years of STEAM that have existed. We would like to, you know, get them in place, get a teacher and start to pick their brain and have them really learn what we have available. And we do have quite a bit available. Because we've had that program before for several years, and then maybe develop that out for next year's budget with additional recommendations and programming.
And as we are, you know, looking in a surplus position for the current year at the moment, you know, maybe if we end up having some funds at the end of the year, we could, you know, that we know we have the budget passed and we have STEAM coming on, we maybe could use that as an opportunity to purchase things. Okay, so this is our sort of our baseline budget. You know, at the top, you see our current year's budget number, 17,017,091. And then these are the either increases and decreases in the various categories that take us to our total increase and the percent of that increase. And probably, you know, most obvious important thing, if you take the salaries and the benefits, that is 642,000 of the 662,000. And all these other things together are only an increase of 23,000. So some of these things that we mentioned in the, here you see it, you know, special ed, tuition, transportation, those things aren't really going down 98,000. We just removed the BCBA of 135,000. So, you know, they're really going up 35,000, but, technology and equipment, we have some, yeah, the technology ask of 114 is bigger than the $75,000 ask for this year. That's just the regular contractual increase for the same transportation that we have. The supplies, which is instructional supplies, custodial supplies, nursing supplies, office supplies, all of that together is requesting a $28,000 increase. Utilities, here's where you're seeing between electricity and natural gas, we're thinking we're going to be saving on utilities next year. The furniture liability insurance, you know, we pay a little over $200,000 a year for various types of liability insurance. I have a 10% escalator in there based on conversations with HD Seeger. And we added some furniture. So every year, you know, Lisa works hard to replace some of the rows in the classrooms. That's part of our schools effort to keep things on a schedule. And also, when we were doing some of our walkthroughs with the teachers' desks, I know that Vito tells us that some of them love them. They've been covered in contact paper in there. Pitiful, old, really dinosaur, and so we are hoping to try to replace some of those to get on a little refreshment schedule to be able to do some of those schedule. Yep, if we can. Yep. And so, yeah, repairs and maintenance, those are, Vito's contracts and things. We did bid out some of it and got a good price. So, the increase of those things are just, a little over $3,000. And yeah, superintendent made a few reductions and things that she thought people were asking for that maybe were covered in a different line and the net of all those things is a requested increase of $662,100 or a 3.89%.
So a few more pages we want to show you. This covers the grant. I think it's important that the board understands the money that we are receiving from title and or, competitive grants. So this just outlines the title 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are written, I write those yearly and we're pretty consistent with how we use them. Title 4 this year, we were able to use school resource officer towards his salary because it's a new position. Next year, it would go back towards Lexia again, which is what we used it for in the past. But we were able to actually purchase Lexia for next year out of this year's funds at the end of the year. So the rest of these, it just helps you understand how we're using our grant funds to support our budget.
And you'll notice there's nobody left in our PESER next year. Two people that were in that grant, one of them is now in the mental health worker grant, and the other is back with the general fund. LEA.
That's a quick question. Which ones of these are renewable and which ones of these continues? Is that what?
So the mental,
Sorry.
that's the one. The rest of the they're called title, like you're entitled to them. Yeah. So
So it's just that one.
Just that one. And that'll be the third year. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
the last year.
Yep.
And how about the right to read? We're gonna use
Those
that this year. Yeah.
Yep, and I'll actually touch on that right now. And I had mentioned it. So the right to read grant and the small town reading grant for districts with under 1,000 students, those funds will be applied directly and they are designed to be applied only and specifically to, programs or resources to support their reading waiver decision. So there will be $200,000 total of that money to go towards program implementation and is great. So this year I did not build any money into the budget for new programs because we can use that money next year to see how far it gets us for partial implementation. And then if we had any money, I don't think we would, but if we had any money at the end of this year, we could put the rest of that money towards the final maybe grade level of implementation. It has to go pay one. And if not, we could build it into next year's budget. Yes. Yep.
Just clarify, that's 200,000 for us. For
Yeah.
the school
So
district.
it's 150 for the small district and 225 for a total of 50 for the right to read.
How long?
We
Is that
have-
for multiple years or is it
It needs to be. by
2
next
years?
But we'll use it, we'll be using it, this year because I'd love to have, if we could possibly have a decision before the spring to have the teachers have the material. I don't want them reading this stuff on the beach, but I also don't want them wondering what it's gonna be. We have, teachers that would love CP to be thinking it. So.
Yeah, so this just represents, $488,000 of things that we don't have to put in the fund.
We're appreciative of that. Page of the place that will grow, right? So we have our current budget at $17,017,091. And then we have this year's recommended budget, which is $17,679,200, or a 3.9 increase. And then we have a line where it says for Board of Ed adjustments, which over the next few meetings, we'll have discussions. And we'll put whatever we need to put in there. And at some point over the next few weeks, we will approve a budget that will go then forward to the town. We try to come up,
No, we're not there yet. I'm sorry.
no, yeah,
The dates, yeah.
Yeah.
This is just the history of the increases that we have received in our budget over the last 6 years. So I think we're kind of right in that neighborhood with this current year.
I have asked around, I can't really disclose towns because they're all in that same position that we are. I've talked to 6 or 7 towns, superintendents, and, so where we're coming in at. We are the first out of all of the groups. And I'm hearing anywhere, ours is the lowest, quite honestly. I'm hearing anywhere between 4.5 and 5.5 for all kinds of districts. And I'm talking small districts and districts with 6 or 7 schools, including like a high school. So, but we are, that doesn't mean that we might not be lower, but we are the lowest out of the ones that have been willing to share with me under the witness protection confidentiality. No names have been released.
And we do have one labor group that we will negotiate with before next year stuff.
Okay. This is kind of the iffy slide. So here we are, we're presenting. And we have a meeting next Monday. That's our regular Board of Education meeting. So we will have other business on the agenda that we will cover. And then we will talk, we'll answer any questions that you might have sent us. We'll answer questions that we can bring to the table. And then we'll figure out what our next meetings are. We had tentatively selected the 3rd and 4th so that we could either use them both or use one as a snow date so that we had ample time to talk. The town would like one of those dates, and I think they picked the 3rd with the possibility of the 4th as a snow date. I can't tell.
Right.
Like to,
If that's voted on by the Board of Selectmen for a special town meeting, they're looking at the 3rd, 4th as possible date for potentially having special town meeting for the approval of the building project.
Yeah,
Here.
bonding for
The
the
bonding.
the roof and the site.
yeah.
Beginning of next year? Or you said
Yeah.
3rd of January?
Yes, Jan 3rd, 4th, and 4th.
So
So we'll go to the Board of Selectmen on Wednesday night. The Board of Selectmen will vote Wednesday night, I'm sorry. And the Board of Selectmen, will then vote to send it to the Board of Finance the following week. The Board of Finance will vote to send it back to the Board of Selectmen to set the date. So by next week, we will have a better sense of what date they set for the special town meeting.
But the good news is we have a lot of options here for dates to meet and talk. So we might be using the 3rd or the 4th or both or none, but we could also use the 8th and the 9th because the budget does need to be adopted to the Board of Selectmen by the 12th.
Yeah, they're giving us an extra
They
week
gave us extra week.
because they
Because of
realize
the
they might be
special
hijacking our
town
date.
Yes.
So they
Right.
said, okay, we'll do it.
So
Right.
we will know more about that soon. And then we will present the adopted budget to the Board of Selectmen and Finance by the 24th. I think that's the date we picked, with the town. And there's a public hearing in April, and then our final Board of Education approval.
And there is also the town meeting in May, which is when the budget would be, so that should be added into the budget process. May. '20,
Okay,
I believe is the date.
all right, I'll double check on
We
that.
can confirm, but.
Yep. And, oh yes, so.
No, our Board of Ed meeting is Tuesday because of town meeting. I'm always the
Got it.
third Monday.
Okay. And so, we will encourage, if people have feedback, they can certainly email them or our board secretary, that's Sarah Beth Priest.
Mhm.
And so I'll probably add Sarah Beth here. And, I would like to put out just a brief survey to parents and staff in terms of, and I have a few questions in mind, but just a quick, simple survey among, are you aware that we presented our budget? Do you know where to go to find our budget? Let's get some information from our people about what do they know and, do they support that type of a number and things like that. So we will be trying to get some feedback and then we'll get better and better at what kind of feedback we get. At this point, that is what we have for you. We also made available to you the document with the numbers. And in fact, next week, we can certainly, make available even additional information. I have Dr. Sheet talks about contractual versus discretionary. We have a lot of information that we will make available starting tomorrow, for you to review for next week. I can email you some of that or not if you want to. But do you have some thoughts or questions for us initially that we can maybe think about or answer or address?
We'll start with that. So I'm just going to remind board members so that on the recording, that if you ask a question or make a comment, if you would speak into the little disc so that our clerk can be certain to capture all of the questions. So do you want to start, Erin, questions or comments?
Sure. First of all, I appreciate this process that you're doing, and I appreciate having the meeting and a separate meeting and then having time to ask the questions. I think this is a better process, and it doesn't feel as rushed as. I also appreciate that there's nothing like surprising in the budget, which is also helpful. I did have a question, which is, I know second grade this year, you had to pull from library to add a classroom teacher to second grade. And so because I didn't see you put somebody back in the library, I'm wondering, how did that go in the library? Do we need to have somebody extra in the I mean, not extra, but do we need to go back to what we had actually budgeted for in the library? Because I know that while sixth grade is leaving out, we have another bubble year that we hadn't anticipated.
That is a good question. We've talked a lot about that. Actually, that is a question that I will be asking. Lisa and I have talked about it, but I'm the team. We've talked about this with Donna. I'm going to ask Lisa to specifically address that in her update next week. So I don't mean to defer it, but
That's
I think
fine.
that, there's just some good information that we can share next week.
The other question is a follow-up to a question I asked many, many minutes ago, which is about the school supplies and whether we looked into incorporating them, how much we were able or were not able to incorporate, and if we're going to be able to reduce the burden on parents for next year for the school supplies, for the out-of-pocket school supply expenses.
Okay, and that's a good question, and we can certainly talk a little bit more about that again next week as well, but I do think I said in one of my board weekly updates that we did not factor in to this budget covering all of the classroom supplies. We did not factor that in, but what we did discuss with Lisa is removing certain things from the list that we could buy in bulk that would not be personalized for children, but like scissors and rulers and things that a teacher could just order a classroom setup and then perhaps need to only replace 5 or 6 every year instead of asking for parents every year or things like that. So we can have these as well. When the administrative team come back next week and identify the things that they will be pulling off that list to kind of shrink the list a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because we did identify some things, like kids may love to pick out like their rulers and things like that, but there are things that we definitely identified that we felt that we could put either into their classroom orders or level. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that'd
Good
be
question.
helpful.
Yep.
Thanks.
Stephen?
So great, so clear. And so the only, I guess I have one observation and a question related to it. It's about special services costs. So looking at page 12, I was looking at the growth in approximate number of staff between the 2015-16 school year and the 2024-25 trajectory. And basically, it's about roughly 20 additional staff. And even though there's a little fluctuation in there, most of that staff is accounted for by special education teachers, teacher assistants, and an occupational therapist. So my question is just in terms of as we think about, and you provided that helpful chart showing the proportion of students who are receiving special services, at what point do we sort of hit the margin on the positions we have and need to add another or more than one full-time, either certified teacher or assistant or some other type of support? Just because as we're growing and looking at those projections, it's likely we're going up. So it may not be salient for this coming year, we may be in fine shape, but just something to keep an eye toward, because that will be a factor then in terms of trade-offs of, then will we gain this STEAM teacher, but then have to lose this STEAM teacher because we actually need additional special education support? I mean, I'd rather, the preference, of course, being we bring this STEAM teacher back and we're able to hold on to that position, but also wanting to be able to provide those services.
And I think that's a great question, and that is something that, again, Carrie has been looking at and studying and may have some initial thinking to share in January when we talk about her update in terms of what she's learning. But I would expect that would take the full year to really analyze what we're looking at. She did come to me a few months ago when we were doing our budget conversations and say, we're kind of on the edge in this department. And, I think I can do with adding an additional day of consultative services, not necessarily a person, but at some point we may need to do X. So I would like her to really continue to review programming, get in there and see before we answer that completely, but she can give you some information with her update. Great question, and she is on it.
Okay, great. Jay, any questions?
I just had one general observation on this whole budget.
Jay,
Thank you very much.
into the, disc, okay?
Okay, thank you. To the disc. Yeah, this is very, very good, very comprehensive. Great to see no major surprises this year. Two things do pop up to me. The first one are the 10% increase, was it? Let me take this more broadly. So we've got insurance expenses, we've got medical expenses, we've got what I would call non-instructional expenses. So as a board, I think that's where I would come in at to see where we can make the efficiency savings. I do not want to impact the instructional side. If there are overheads that we can lower, and I would think one of the biggest overheads is healthcare expenses and benefits. So I would have liked to see some alternatives put forward on that front, because we're going up 10%. I believe last year it went up about 6.5%. And so when I looked at the last 4 years, we've gone up about 45%. That accounts for about 30% of any increase. So we should, if we look at big items, that's the one we should jump on straight away to say, can we move to some alternative plan? I think we were looking at the state plan. Can we do something with the town? Again, to maybe look at that, to see if we can get some efficiency savings there. I would say the same with the liability and the insurance. Can we get the town to underwrite an umbrella maybe that will cover all of us?
Together, both of those.
Maybe we need to go out and look for things that might be better. I think we did that in the past. Look for something that is beneficial for us. It might not necessarily work for the town, but overall there's a cost saving. Does that make sense?
I think, I mean, we can just bid out those.
That's right. And the state plan, I think, for insurance is one that I think many school districts have moved to. They found the alternative plans are expensive, But I noticed the state plan went up this year significantly. Yeah. Right.
So I've had bad experience with
Same
with
thing,
that
isn't it?
myself. So,
I just look at those with overheads and I'm thinking if I look at the increase, majority of it's coming from that. So I think you've done an excellent job using the resource and recycling the resource. So I like the STEAM teacher and I'm worried with Stephen's concern. Are we going to go back in 2027 and say we've got to take that off because some other area needs it? So that's my big worry, that if we're going to make a commitment, then I think there's got to be an investment in that position. I think when you said to me we're going to use equipment for the last few years, I know how fast tech moves. I mean, anything that's six months old today is
We still, still a lot of.
equipment in the
you can
classroom.
see it.
The equipment.
A lot. By the person or board to, you know, and.
What we need.
Math or science funds for that, just not a whole budget.
But that would be fantastic. That's excellent. That was one of the questions. I think that.
6 or 7% here, and we're. So I think for medical, for medical, for health.
It's very high.
So I do think, I don't know what's happening right now, and I was just saying to Stephen, I don't understand why there's not more outrage at a state level, because they're just, it's ridiculous, and you would think that there would be more pushback, but that's what they're coming in for us. They went up 6 or 7 last year and 11 this year.
you've heard the partnership with 14 this year? But it's the 14% of what, still, you know?
Yeah.
That's the base math. That's why it was, we can get the base to the lower level. And I think they base it on actuarial industry. So just those overheads. And that's why I always say I'd like to see the budget started in October on those parts. I know the instructional part can wait till December because I see that moving very little. But that part we can start working on in October, November, and we can start bidding out. We can start getting these quotes. So when you come in November, you can say to the finance committee or the board, this is what we're able to lower. This is what we're able to do. Because that does not affect the instruction. And that's where I want to focus on, I think. And that's, I think, I've tried to sort of navigate us in that direction.
Yeah.
I also had a second question. So it's related to the teaching assistants. So I noticed when I look at the trend from 2015 right through to COVID, we sort of dropped from about 15 in general ed to about 8. Now we're back to about 9.5. And so what's a good number there? Is 1 in a classroom a good number, or 1 across the grade, or 2 across the grade? Or I would like to sort of get some feedback. I think more is better, is what I would say. So I would be reluctant to cut any parents at this stage. That's just my inclination. I would like to retain those 2 positions and recycle them into general ed. That's just the way I'm thinking on this. I had one other thing, and it's a contingency. And I know it's very difficult to plan for contingencies. The pool. So the pool will significantly affect our budget. So is there any, and I think we've talked about these, have good conversations about some type of fund that would ensure that those costs are covered. Can we have a discussion with the town on, it'd be great to get that pool back because our kids benefit and so do the town. And so I'd really like to get that asset up and running. It's sitting there, not being used, but that's going to incur a cost now. It's not just from the electricity. I think we get the lifeguard. There's all other costs that we incur associated with it. And our insurance probably goes up as a result as well. So if we could have some understanding on how that would work if our budget was altered as a result of that next year, That would be very, very good. So some contingency from the town on that. Last question I had was really with the investment in technology. When I'm looking at our investment in technology, and I know we bought a lot of great equipment this year, we put on some investments in leasing and in the Apple, and that's shown with our recognition. And I think this is fantastic. But it would be great, again, to see how we're cycling off the equipment to make sure that we're updating it routinely and not waiting till it falls apart. We're up to date with our software and technology. So it'd be great to see sort of just a little chart to say, this is 5 years, this is 3 years, this is 2 years, so we know
Yep.
when and how we're upgrading our equipment and
Yep.
when we're. And that's also to do with the hardware. We talk about just this sort of hardware, but I'm also talking about mainframe. I'm talking about anything that supports the system. We have to have something that says, no, that's been in place 10 years. We can't keep using it, just like the desks, right? But I think the tech part is really important because I think it will put a bigger burden on the people supporting it. It'd be great to see what our cycle is.
Yep.
My last question is, why aren't we leasing some of this stuff? Are we looking at buy or lease, or are we just going to buy?
We have a tech lease for some Apple products. Next year will be the 4th year of 5. But yeah, we were, we would lease, but
How does the lease or buy work in this? Because I would have thought lease is nice in a way because it smooths our budget out and they take care of the equipment to a degree.
except that we almost do this every year for a grade or something, the way we
It's
refresh.
recycling. And so if we are getting a longer life cycle than they're giving us, that makes sense. But from a perspective of sort of budgeting, it's going to be, this is why I'm saying we can find out what the cycle is and then smooth it out. Then it makes sense. Or go with a lease because it makes a smooth budget until everything's replaced on a routine basis. Does that make sense? So we don't have to go in and say, 500 laptops need replacing 1 year. So we just match the two cycles up. I think at the moment leasing is very, very favorable. They're trying to get rid of their equipment. And so I'm finding that it's very favorable. And then going to Aaron's point, you said the increases, I'm seeing general increases in healthcare about 10%. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know how you're gonna. But a 3% budget increase, I think, is 3.89 is very, very good. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
I also really appreciate this process. It's great to be able to have more lead time. What done with the budget yard, it's fine. That's great too. A lot of great questions. Main one, it's great that we have that money in the state to support. Concern I had initially that how that was going to impact our budget seems like it's not. Because we now have that fund. Yeah, not yet. Yeah. This year.
Next year.
Yeah, next year.
Depending on
What we do, right, depending, there would be professional development costs and areas. But so I'm glad to see that that's covered for next year. But also made me wonder about math, talking a bit about what that's going to look like next year. And thought about what the model we're going, the models we might have for next year might impact our budget.
So, we talk about all of this a lot, as an administrative team. And so, we did build a little bit of extra money into the budget this coming up year for math professional learning and math resources. As we grow our learning about what our students need. And, Principal Sherman and I were talking, gosh, it might have even been today, about the need for in January, because I had said to the board, we give you a math update in November, which we did. and then a math update in January. And after the math update in January, will most likely be much more focused around what are we anticipating for next year in terms of instructional opportunities for students in the upper grades. So, and when I say that, I just want to clarify that the instructional opportunities that we offer students at the upper level in terms of differentiation and extension, that starts at a very low level, right? That mindset starts in kindergarten. So we continue to need to build those teachers' skills as well, so that it's an expectation of learners that you're going to meet where you are, and not something that just happens when you're in an upper grade. You know, and our teachers have quite a lot on their plates. They need to learn, our K-3 need to learn new literacy strategies starting now. You know, we are working very hard to embed K-6 mathematical understanding of going deeper, richer, differentiating. We have to overhaul our teacher evaluation plan by the end of the year. We have to overhaul at some point, probably not now until next fall, our school climate plan. You know, we have the educator diversity plan. We have a lot of those things to do. But with that said, we will anticipate the board will want an update. It will probably be January. I think February might be too late to talk about what it could look like for students next year. Will it look different than what we have? Will it look a little bit richer? And what is it that we're looking for? Yeah. But we did build some money for professional learning and resources specifically for that.
How about any of those other things you mentioned, teacher evaluation? Are there additional costs that might be associated with that? How big of a revamp is that?
It's a huge, completely different. The state is recommending a complete overhaul for the teachers and the administrators, even down to what kind of a rubric are you using. Instead of a multi-point, they want a single point rubric, but it depends on what the standards that you use. And again, theoretically, the state is supposed to provide us with a model exemplary plan, maybe in March. And so this is really due.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, one of our jobs as leaders in districts is, you know, we're meeting with state reps next week. The BOA group is, the SCASA group, and that's one of our agenda items. We need a little bit more time on this. This is not something, if you want it done well, and you want it to really shift feedback and instruction, we need a little bit more time to do this.
Yeah. Well, I ask about that because I'm familiar with some of these measures of teacher evaluation, and they can be somewhat costly to do well, to get, especially if you're doing the observation of instruction. You need to have raters who are trained on the measure. They need to get reliable, and that can be, and that can be expensive. Right.
Marcia would be this. So, and then that's a lot of our summertime. That's our summertime thing. There's a lot on everybody's plate because it's not just about the experience. Our teachers need to know, right? I firmly believe that if you tell a child what they're going to need to do and what it's going to look like when they do it well, they'll do it. They'll do it. They'll meet our expectations. Same thing with our teachers. If they understand what we're looking for and they understand what it looks like, our teachers are excellent. Excellent.
But we've accounted for that.
Yet, we did not reduce in any way any of those pieces. We've accounted for what we can plan for. We have no idea there, right? If this is gonna require a new platform to house the information. We did not go into that. Cause we wouldn't even begin to know how to.
Thanks, Mike. Jeff, anything?
No, thank you. Great process. Appreciate the timeliness of it. One statistic or talking point I'd like to have, especially talking to community members, is how much of the budget is fixed, either in a dollar amount or percentage. It really helps start the conversation off in the right direction when you realize this budget is not that flexible. So a simple math equation or something for next meeting would be awesome if you could easily put that together.
Yeah.
Other than that, great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Maria?
Thank you. I first want to say thank you, again, for this process and for laying everything out so clearly for us here, giving us time to really look at that. As Mike said, there's been a lot of great points and really great suggestions so far. So I don't have anything very new to add, but I want to build on a couple of points. I did also notice that library support wasn't added in, so I am interested to hear how that's working currently. And I also have concerns that we want to make sure that when we invest in this STEAM position, that this is a position that we are going to stay invested in, and this is a role that's going to continue at Beecher Road School because it is very much needed. And you know, the thought given to maybe perhaps one of their roles being, you know, support in that math differentiation area for the 6th grade. Like perhaps that could be one of their, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure you've already thought about that, but I just want to make sure that that's, you know, that could be a large part because I think that would also, that role is also incredibly valuable to the district as well. And then feeding off of Jeff's point, also with regard to, you know, how much is fixed versus flexible, there are a lot of question marks also, and there's only question marks because we just don't know yet. We are, you know, we have estimates for our healthcare costs going up, estimates for insurance, you know, utilities, we know what we're working with because our contracts are at least through next year. There's a bargaining unit negotiation that needs to happen. We're unsure when the pool would be reopened again, and also the professional development needed for curriculum. So with all of those question marks, and I'm sure there's others I haven't hit, what type of flexibility is there in the budget if we need to find money to fund one or more of those, if those increases come in above what we think that they will?
And just so Donna, you know, has been working on a fixed versus discretionary chart for you all. It's not finalized, so we'll hand that out and make it available earlier than, you know, next week, but it'll be part of our discussion for next week. But she started to put something together. She goes, what do you think? I said, I really like that. I think it would be very helpful for the public to see. It's just a one-page thingy and very helpful. So
Just say so. That raises a good point. Definitely like your point about the fixed versus floating. I think it's important to see contractual, fixed,
yeah.
and discretionary. So I think there's 3 categories there from the way I see it. So I bet you did. Okay.
Yeah, we're
Because like last time I checked, and it was like 89% and 90% was fixed, but then even with the 10%, there was some things, and I remember about 4 or 5% that you couldn't really legally change, but they were called discretion. So I really want to sort of iron out and say, I think it's probably only 4% that the discretion. Just had a quick question on Maria's point. So I think that Carrie told us about that one position that had, is it being funded this year for the last year? Yeah. Oh, next year. So we're not. Okay. So, yeah, so we're going to be really careful because it looks like we could have significant jumps in the following year without any changes in the FTEs. So again, I think we need to document this up front. Does that make sense? So I think it's really important to say these are the contingencies. And we're looking at estimates, and I like Maria's idea saying that if we come in at 12% on something that we only anticipated at 8%, that's another 50,000. Now we've got to find that. The question is, where do you get that from? So I think it's important to see those contingencies, and as the year goes through, check them off and say, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. Most of the time, right, this is, I think Mike's question is all about the reading curriculum. I mean, I think anybody knows what the cost is going to be. It could be way beyond what they provided.
Opportunity for us to be strong. Our students may have struggled, and so we're going to use that lens to look at the program offerings and pick one that best aligns with our population.
They need additional resource in terms of tech. It may need training, as you said, all of these things.
Make an initial purchase. Most of these resources and programs and compendiums come with a 6-year tech subscription. So, you know, the tech companies, and I was explaining that to somebody, I don't remember who, they're pretty smart, and they realize that after a 6-year period, technology may have changed enough so that what they have isn't compatible. So most programmatic purchases come with a 6-year student interface.
You're committing to 6 years then? Is that the-
Well, they, you know, they have the, you can commit to 1 year, you can commit to 3, you can commit to 6, 6 is cheaper.
You're giving a better price.
Right,
Further out, you go.
right,
Sure.
right.
But what would be good to know, at least ballpark figure around what some of these programs might be.
Yeah,
Some of
yeah,
these
we're in,
approaches.
yep, and we are. Gathered some, we were just kind of hopeful that, you know, our results might have been, you know, a little bit more favorable, not that we felt our work was done, but it, it is what it is, so yes, we are working on it.
What I'm learning with this process is the contingency planning. Most businesses I work with, that's the key part. How do you balance those things? And I'm noticing that changes significantly. So you got a curveball thrown at you this year. How are you going to deal with that? It's nice that they gave you some money, but I don't think it's going to meet the needs. Right. And the time commitment as well. They're not factoring that in. Right.
Contingency.
Right. Thank you.
Nothing else, Maria? Okay, I have just, one question in terms of, page 8, the enrollment page, Rhonda. And I'm just looking at, and I want to, keep our eye on and be cognizant of the grade 1 class size, which does exceed our guidelines. And, I know that also people will look at this and say, oh, so does kindergarten. But kindergarten, we're supporting them with a paraprofessional in the classroom. And so I would really like to keep an eye on that grade 1, the class size. Having taught grade 1, I have to advocate for my grade 1ers. It's a very pivotal year, I think, in education, so I want to be looking at that and making sure that we, as we had to do this year, and add the additional section in 2nd grade, which I think was absolutely the right decision to be made, have a contingency, So, that's the only comment that I have. Anything else, board members?
I would just like to say that we appreciate your listening and your questions, and while it was a lot of work to get this done, we both agreed that driving home tonight, we would be very happy that it was done a little bit ahead of the board meeting so that we had time to think.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it was well worth the extra time that it needed to put in place for this. So we heard your concerns, we heard what you were looking for, I feel. Yep, and they were reasonable concerns, and so we're trying very hard to be responsive to what is best for our district.
So I thank both of you for that, for the hard work. For the other administrators who gave input into this, because it's not one person or two people who do this. You know, it's a real village, and so we thank you for your efforts, as well. I'm going to just remind board members that now you have this document, you take a look at it. If between now and Thursday or Friday, you have questions that you think of that you'd like an answer for, if you could email them to Donna or Vonda so that they're prepared for Monday, I think that will help us to get the best answers we can get. Rather than waiting until Monday and having 20 questions and then them having to come back to us. If they can get some of the answers for us for next Monday's meeting, I think that would be very helpful. And then as soon as we know the answer to the special town meeting, we will let you know when the next one or two budget sessions will be held and when we'll be taking action on the budget. Any other questions about that? Thank you all for being here. And Marcia, as always, thank you. I need a motion to adjourn at 8:32. Anybody want to do that? Anyone want to second that? Steven?
I'm sorry, Lynn, who did you have as a maker of that motion, please?
The motion was made by Maria.
Okay.
And seconded by Steve Lauren. I'll now ask for a vote. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Unanimous, thank you. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Marcia.